Tales of Mithrym.
Skeleton Crew, read by Lorenzo. Part 1. The Life. Ducky Repton stood at the bow of the ship. Cold splashes of water washed across his face from the sea far below as the great ship ploughed its way forward. The smell of salt water filled his nostrils, and he breathed a deep sigh as a broad smile formed on his face. This was the life. This was how things should be. Things seemed simpler out here, easier than they had been back in Angmark. There were no wardens here, no sneaky officers of the law hiding round every corner, waiting for him to slip up. There was no army here even, no officers barking out orders at the hired swords and expecting him to fall in line like a good little soldier. They had not seen another ship for days now, nothing but the open seas. The last land had been miles back. Or was it knots? The sailors kept talking about knots. They seemed to be important somehow. Ducky made a mental note to try and find out what the knots were for. It did not matter right now, though. No land, not even an island, had been seen in a long while. The winds were strong in the sails, and the ship was pushing fast ahead. Beside him, sat with their legs dangling over the side, were his friends, Elvin and Dervil. Elvin had finally shed his uniform coat and was letting the breeze and the wash cool him down in just his shirt sleeves. The weather was certainly getting hotter now. The sun on your face made you feel like you were going to melt right onto the deck. Dervil, too, who usually wore a long, heavy frock coat, was now likewise dressed in shirt, breeches and boots, and had let her long red hair down to blow in the breeze. Ducky himself was bearing the heat. His armor felt heavy on his shoulders at the moment, and his helmet was making his head sweat. But he had been in harder conditions, and he was blowed if he was going to let his guard down, even here. "I'm bored." Dervil leant her head back to look up at Ducky. She was smiling, though. "What do you want me to do about it?" Ducky smiled back. "Bored?" Elvin broke in mock shock. "How can you be bored? Just look out there. The sun is shining, and just look at all that." "Water?" Dervil cut in. "Nothing but water as far as the eye can see." The three of them laughed. Just then a voice cut in from somewhere in midships. "If you're all looking for something to do, I've got a job for you." Ducky made his way over to talk to the man. The figure was short and stocky. His hair, such as he still had, was dark and curled, and his eyes were keen. He was dressed in the same working clothes as the other sailors. However, he was in fact the first mate. He and Ducky spoke for some time as Elvin and Dervil craned to watch. A few moments later, Ducky went into a cabin room with the man, then returned carrying a handful of poles. He beamed as he walked back. "Who's up for a bit of fishing then?" Ducky called to them. Dervil and Elvin both stood to meet him as he made his way back to the bow. They each took a rod, and Ducky dropped the rest of the supplies on the deck. "So the thing about casting a line," Elvin began, pointing at the rod and the line on it, "is that you should—" He was cut off by a whooshing sound, though, as Dervil scoffed and cast her line out into the water. Ducky laughed a deep laugh and then cast his as well. Elvin shrugged, then brought his line back and cast it out towards the sea. The hook arced through the clear air and came to land gently, some considerable way from the ship, where it sank just below the water. Elvin smiled a satisfied smile. A long time passed as they sat and watched the water. Elvin thought to himself that the fast movement of the ship was likely too much for any fish to really be all that near, but it was nevertheless very relaxing. He loosened his grip on the rod and began to lean back and bask in the sun. It really was getting very hot. All of a sudden, though, the rod shot from his hands. He sat bolt upright and stared out to the sea. "Watch it!" Ducky shouted beside him. The tall man had spotted the movement and with a swift motion had brought his hand up to grab at it. Ducky was now holding Elvin's rod tight in one hand as he reached to drop his own on the deck beside them. As he did, though, he felt a jerk forwards and nearly slipped from the deck completely. Just as this happened, both Elvin and Dervil grabbed him around the waist. The three of them were scrambling hard to pull Ducky and the line in together. A way off ahead they could make out the break of the waves that seemed to indicate a fish not far beneath the surface. With a great effort they all fell backwards, Ducky still holding firm to the line. His arms came up sharply, as along with them came both the line and an enormous fish. The creature was almost as long as Ducky was tall, and it landed hard on his chest as he fell backwards onto the deck. Excitement from the crew was growing now as many of the sailors ran towards the bow. Cries of "Catch it!" and "Hold it fast!" could be heard from all around the ship. Elvin lurched towards Ducky and attempted to grab it, just as Ducky too brought his arms up. The fish had flapped itself loose though, and the two men ended up hugging each other as Dervil rolled over them and attempted to grapple it. The fish still fought hard, and Elvin and Ducky both rolled over and scrambled to catch it too. The three of them ended up in one great heap along with the fish, laughing a happy laugh as the sailors came and took the creature away. That night, they cooked it with lemons and herbs. Ducky leaned back in his chair and looked up at the stars. Yes, he thought, this is definitely the life.
Tales of Mithrym are written by Jimmy Clephane. Mithrym is a fantasy world built for the Dungeon Room role-playing game system. To find out more about the world of Mithrym, or to try out the game, go to www.mithrym.com.